Okay, so here's the thing. Being handsome and being photogenic, two completely different worlds. You can be gorgeous in real life, but the camera just doesn't love you the same way. Being photogenic means your bone structure, your skin texture, the way light naturally hits your face, your facial symmetry. All of it just works on camera without even trying. Now imagine this. Instead of fans voting with their bias goggles on, actual Korean photography communities, portrait photographers, hobbyists who study lighting and composition for fun, sat down and voted on which BTS member is the most photogenic. And guess what? The results did not follow the popularity rankings at all. Some of these picks will shock you. So who made every single frame look like a magazine cover? Who caught photographers completely off guard? Let's count down from number 7 to number 1. And trust me, you're not ready for this. Number 7, RM. All right, starting us off at number 7, and honestly, this is already going to spark some debates because we're talking about none other than Kim Namjoon, RM, the leader of BTS. Now, before anyone gets heated, let me be very clear about something. Landing at number 7 on a list where the judges are actual photographers from Korean photography communities does not mean he's not photogenic. Are you kidding? This is a list of 7 members who are all ridiculously photogenic. Someone has to be 7th, and even 7th place here is still elite level camera presence. But when photographers break it down with their analytical eyes, they look at things differently than fans do. And that's what makes this whole ranking so fascinating. So let's get into it. RM has always been the kind of figure who commands a room the moment he walks in. That's not a fan exaggeration. It's literally what photographers describe when they talk about shooting him. At 181 centimeters tall, with broad shoulders, long limbs, and proportions that are genuinely model tier, RM's full-body shots are consistently strong. Portrait photographers in Korean communities have pointed out that his body ratio, particularly his shoulder-to-waist proportion and his leg length relative to his torso, actually photographs better than most professional models they've worked with. When you see him in a wide shot at a concert, standing at the center of the stage with his arms outstretched, there's this almost cinematic quality to the frame. He doesn't just fill the space, he owns it. And that kind of spatial dominance in a photograph is something you genuinely cannot teach. Now let's talk about his face, because this is where the photography community gets really specific and really interesting. RM has what's called a high contrast face. His features are bold, strong jawline, prominent brow ridge, deep set eyes, and of course, those signature dimples that have literally become iconic in K-pop culture. Photographers love high contrast faces because they respond incredibly well to dramatic lighting setups, hard light, shadows carving along his jaw, studio portraits with a single key light and no fill. RM eats that up. His bone structure creates natural shadows that give his photos depth and dimension without any post-processing needed. One photographer in a popular Korean photography forum, specifically on a Naver community dedicated to portrait photography, wrote that RM's face is built for editorial work because of how well his features hold up under harsh, directional lighting that would flatten most other faces. And here's the thing that a lot of casual observers miss. RM's photogenic evolution over the years is arguably the most dramatic in all of BTS. If you go back to the 2013 debut era, Namjoon was still growing into his features. He was younger, his styling was very different, and the photography direction for BTS back then was, let's be honest, not the most flattering for any of the members. But as the years went on, particularly from 2016's Wings era onward, something shifted. His face matured, his jawline became more defined, he leaned into a more refined personal style, and most importantly, he became incredibly comfortable in front of the camera. That comfort is something photographers can see instantly. There's a visible difference between someone who's posing for a camera and someone who's simply existing in front of one. And RM crossed that threshold somewhere around 2017 to 2018. By the time the Map of the Soul era hit, his photo presence was magnetic. Those concept photos, the ones where he's staring directly into the lens with that quiet intensity, photographers dissected those images and pointed out how his eye contact creates what they call a direct engagement line. Basically, when RM looks into a camera, it doesn't feel like he's looking at a lens. It feels like he's looking at you. That emotional dimension in a still photograph is rare, and it's something that separates a good photo subject from a great one. His dimples deserve their own paragraph, honestly. In the photography community, dimples are considered a dynamic feature. They change the topology of the face when the subject smiles, creating small pockets of shadow that add warmth and approachability to an image. RM's dimples are deep and symmetrical, which means they photograph consistently well from almost any angle. Whether it's a three-quarter profile or a dead-center frontal shot, those dimples add a layer of charm that softens his otherwise strong, angular features. It's like nature gave him the perfect balance. The jawline says power, the dimples say warmth, and together they create a duality that makes his portraits genuinely compelling. So why number 7 then? Here's where the photographers get technical. Number 6, J-Hope. Okay, number 6. And this is exactly where things start getting spicy, because we're talking about Jungkook, J-Hope, the man who most casual observers would probably not expect to see ranked this competitively on a photogenic list. And that reaction right there, that's exactly why the Korean photography community's perspective is so valuable, because they see things that the general public completely overlooks. When fans think of visuals in BTS, J-Hope's name doesn't always come up first. And the photography community actually addressed that head-on, with multiple threads essentially saying, the general public is sleeping on this man's face, and it's genuinely baffling. So let's break down what photographers actually see when they look at J-Hope, because once you hear this, you will never look at his photos the same way again. First things first, bone structure. This is the foundation of everything in photogenic analysis, and J-Hope has something that photographers in Korean communities described as a sculpted midface. His cheekbones are high and naturally prominent, sitting at an angle that catches light beautifully in almost any setup. When a key light hits J-Hope from a standard 45-degree angle, which is the most common portrait lighting position, his cheekbones create these elegant shadow pockets just below them that give his face incredible three-dimensionality. This is the kind of facial architecture that editorial photographers dream about, because it means the face essentially lights itself. You don't need complex multi-light setups or heavy retouching to make J-Hope's bone structure pop. One light source, and his face does all the work. Portrait photographers on a well-known Korean photography forum specifically called out his zygomatic arch, that's the bone that forms the prominence of the cheek, as being one of the most photogenic among all active K-pop idols, not just within BTS. That's a bold claim, and multiple photographers backed it up with side-by-side comparisons and lighting diagrams. Now let's talk about something that makes J-Hope absolutely unique in the photography conversation: his jaw and chin line. J-Hope has a sharper, more angular jaw than people realize, and it becomes especially apparent in three-quarter profile shots. When he turns his head slightly, not full profile, but that sweet spot where you can see both eyes but the face has clear dimensional depth. His jawline creates this clean, razor-sharp line from ear to chin that photographers described as editorial-grade geometry. In the fashion photography world, that jaw angle is everything. It's what separates a casual snapshot from a portrait that belongs in a magazine. And J-Hope's jaw delivers that consistently, shot after shot, angle after angle. One photographer even posted a series of screenshots from various BTS photo shoots and circled J-Hope's jaw in each one, showing how the line remained clean and defined regardless of whether he was looking up, looking down, turning left, or turning right. That kind of structural consistency is genuinely rare. But here's where J-Hope's photogenic story gets really fascinating, and it's something the photography community spent a lot of time discussing: his duality. See, J-Hope has what photographers call a transformative face, a face that can look dramatically different depending on expression, styling, and lighting, almost like you're looking at a completely different person. During BTS's earlier eras and in his signature sunshine mode, J-Hope's face reads as warm, open, youthful, and approachable. His smile is wide, his eyes crinkle, and there's this infectious energy that radiates through the photograph. But then, and this is the part that made photographers sit up straight, you look at his work from the Jack in the Box era, from his solo concept photos, from certain dark concept BTS shoots, and suddenly J-Hope's face becomes something else entirely. The same bone structure that creates warmth in bright lighting becomes almost dangerously sharp in dramatic lighting. His eyes, which sparkle with joy in one photo, can go completely cold and intense in the next.
Number 5. Jin. All right, number 5. And I need you to actually sit down for this one, because this placement right here is the one that set Korean photography forums on absolute fire. We're talking about Kim Sek-jin. Jin, the man who literally holds the official title of visual in BTS, the man who coined the term worldwide handsome as what everyone thought was a joke until the entire planet just collectively agreed that, yeah, he actually is. The man who was street scouted by SM Entertainment just for walking to school because a casting agent saw his face from across the street and physically ran after him. That guy. Number 5. Not number 1, not number 2, number 5. And before the Jin stands start preparing their pitchforks, hear me out completely, because the reasoning behind this placement is actually one of the most fascinating photography discussions you'll ever encounter. And by the end of this, you might actually agree, or at least understand. Let's start with what is absolutely, undeniably, universally acknowledged. Kim Sek-jin's face is one of the most classically beautiful faces in the entire entertainment industry. This isn't fan bias talking, this is data. Multiple facial analysis studies, plastic surgeon commentaries, and digital symmetry measurements have placed Jin's facial proportions within the top percentile of the golden ratio. His face is almost absurdly symmetrical. His left side and right side are so close to being mirror images of each other that one Korean university study on facial symmetry in public figures literally used his photo as a reference point. His eyes are large, evenly spaced, with a gentle double eyelid fold that creates depth without overwhelming his other features. His nose bridge is straight, with a refined tip that balances perfectly against the width of his face. His lips, particularly his upper lip, have a pronounced Cupid's bow shape that's become one of his most recognizable features. And his jawline? It's clean, defined, and tapers to a chin that completes the oval face shape that's been considered the ideal face shape in Korean beauty standards for decades. In real life, in person, Kim Sek-jin is the kind of person who makes rooms go silent when he walks in. There are countless accounts from fans, industry professionals, and even other celebrities who've described the experience of seeing Jin in real life as almost surreal, like encountering a person whose face doesn't belong in the real world. Photographers acknowledged all of this. Every single thread discussing Jin's ranking started with some variation of, "Let's get one thing out of the way. This man is absurdly beautiful." That was never in question. So what happened? Why did a community of people who professionally analyze faces for photographic purposes place the most classically handsome member of BTS at number 5? And this is where it gets genuinely interesting from a technical standpoint. The Korean photography community introduced a concept in these discussions that most non-photographers never consider: the difference between beautiful and photographically dynamic. See, Jin's face is incredibly harmonious. Every feature is balanced, proportional, and classically positioned, and in real life, that harmony creates an overwhelming impression of beauty. But in photography, particularly in still portrait photography, extreme harmony can sometimes work against a subject in unexpected ways. Photographers explained it like this: when every feature is perfectly balanced, the eye doesn't have a natural anchor point to land on. In a great portrait photograph, there's usually one feature that acts as a focal point. Maybe it's an unusually expressive eyes, or a distinctive jawline, or an asymmetric smile, something that draws the viewer's eye and creates visual tension. With Jin's face, the proportions are so evenly distributed that the eye tends to take in the whole face at once, without landing anywhere specific. It's beautiful, absolutely, but photographers described it as harmoniously static in certain lighting conditions. One photographer put it in a way that actually made the whole community pause and think. Jin's face is like a perfectly composed symphony where every instrument plays at the exact same volume. It's technically flawless, but sometimes you want one instrument to be louder than the rest to create emotional impact. That analogy struck a chord, no pun intended, because it perfectly captures the nuance of what photographers photographers were trying to articulate. It's not that Jin's face isn't photogenic. It absolutely is. It's that his photogenic quality is of a very specific type: classic, elegant, timeless, but sometimes lacking the unpredictable visual tension that certain other faces naturally create. Another technical point that came up repeatedly was about lighting response. Jin has very fair, smooth, porcelain-like skin, which is stunningly beautiful in person and in carefully controlled studio environments. But photographers noted that this skin type can sometimes present challenges in varied lighting conditions. Very fair, smooth skin tends to reflect light more uniformly, which can reduce the appearance of facial dimension in photographs. Those subtle shadows and highlights that give a face depth and texture in a photo, they're slightly less pronounced on Jin's skin type, particularly in flat or overcast lighting setups. Several photographers shared comparison shots showing how Jin looked absolutely godlike in golden hour or warm studio lighting, where the warmth of the light interacted with his skin to create gorgeous tonal variation, but looked slightly flatter in cooler, more neutral lighting setups. This isn't a flaw in any meaningful sense. It's a characteristic that simply means certain lighting conditions favor him more than others, while some other members have skin types and facial structures that are more lighting agnostic. Now let's talk about expressions, because this was another major discussion point. Jin's range of expressions in photographs tends to orbit around a few signature looks: the classic handsome straight face, the gentle smile, the playful mischievous grin, and the dramatic serious gaze. All of these are effective, and all of them produce beautiful images. But photographers who are used to shooting hundreds or thousands of frames in a single session pointed out that between these distinct expressions, Jin's transitional micro-expressions, those fleeting in-between moments, are less varied compared to some other members. Again, the images you do get are stunning, but the variety within a single session is where some photographers felt other members had an edge. However, and this is a big however, the photography community was absolutely emphatic about one thing: Jin's side profile. Multiple photographers, including some who ranked him lower in overall photogenic score, specifically called out his side profile as potentially the single most photogenic angle of any BTS member, period. Jin's side profile is genuinely extraordinary. The line from his forehead to his nose, from his nose to his lips, from his lips to his chin is like it was drawn by an artist who had unlimited time to perfect every curve. His nose in profile has this perfect straight bridge with a gently rounded tip that creates an incredibly elegant silhouette. His chin projects just enough to create a clean, strong profile line without being prominent. And his famous broad shoulders, those legendary internet-breaking 60-centimeter shoulders, create a frame for that profile that makes it look like a classical sculpture. Photographers specifically mentioned that if they were to shoot Jin for a high-end fashion or luxury brand campaign, they would shoot him almost exclusively in profile or three-quarter angles, because from those angles, the harmony that sometimes reads as static from the front suddenly becomes breathtakingly sculptural from the side. It's like his face was optimized for dimensional viewing rather than flat frontal photography. The community also acknowledged something really important about Jin that goes beyond pure technical analysis: his photographic legacy. Jin was the visual of a group that was photographed more than almost any human beings on the planet for nearly a decade. The sheer volume of stunning photographs of this man that exist, from concept photos to red carpet shots to candid fan-taken images, is staggering. And in the vast majority of those photos, he looks incredible. The fact that he's number 5 here is not an indictment of his visual power. It's a testament to how insanely competitive this list is. When you're ranked behind other members on this list, it doesn't mean you lost. It means the competition is just that unbelievably stacked. So yeah, the official visual of BTS, the worldwide handsome himself, Kim Sek-jin, sits at number 5 on the Korean photography community's photogenic ranking. And if you're still processing that, just wait, because the 4 members ranked above him, those discussions are about to get even wilder. That's your number 5.
Number 4, Suga. Number 4, and I know some of you just did a double take. You probably scrolled back up. You probably reread the title of this point just to make sure your eyes weren't deceiving you. Min Yoongi, Sugar, August D, the rapper, the producer, the guy who sits in the back during interviews looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. That Min Yoongi is sitting at number 4 on a photogenic ranking above Kim Taehyung, the literal designated visual of BTS. And I need you to understand something. This wasn't a fluke vote. This wasn't trolling. And this wasn't some tiny minority opinion. When Korean photography communities, real portrait photographers, editorial shooters, people who light faces and press shutters for a living, analyze the photogenic qualities of all 7 BTS members, Min Yoongi consistently, repeatedly, and emphatically landed in the upper tier. And the way they talked about his face, it was borderline reverent. So let's get into exactly why, because this is where photography analysis becomes genuinely mind-blowing. The very first thing that photographers brought up when discussing Suga was his eyes. Min Yoongi's eyes are, in the professional photography community's assessment, among the most photographically compelling eyes in modern Korean entertainment. And here's why that matters so much. In portrait photography, the eyes are everything. They are the absolute epicenter of any portrait image. A viewer's gaze will always go to the eyes first. Always, without exception. This is hardwired into human visual processing. So when a photographer evaluates how photogenic someone is, the eyes carry disproportionate weight in that assessment. And Yoongi's eyes? They're extraordinary. He has these narrow, cat-like, slightly upturned eyes with a subtle eyelid fold that creates an incredibly unique light pattern. When light enters his eyes, the narrower shape concentrates the catchlight, that little reflection of the light source that makes eyes look alive in a photo, into a tighter, more intense point. This means that in photographs, Yoongi's eyes don't just look like they're reflecting light, they look like they're generating it. There's this piercing, almost luminous quality to his gaze in photos that photographers described as magnetically intense. One photographer, in a widely shared Naver post, wrote, "I've photographed hundreds of faces professionally. Min Yoongi's eyes are the kind that make you stop culling through photos because every single frame with his eyes in focus looks like a finished piece." That's not casual praise. That's a professional saying that his eyes alone are enough to make a photograph work. But it goes deeper than just the shape. It's about what his eyes do in photographs. Yoongi has what photographers call an emotionally loaded resting gaze. Most people, when they're not actively emoting, have a neutral expression that reads as blank or passive in photographs. Yoongi's resting expression is fundamentally different, even when he's doing absolutely nothing. Not smiling, not posing, not performing. His eyes carry this weight of quiet intensity that reads as deeply contemplative, slightly melancholic, and utterly captivating. It's the kind of expression that makes you look at a photo and immediately start wondering what he's thinking about. That emotional depth in a completely unstaged, natural expression is something photographers rarely encounter, and when they find it, they lose their minds over it. Because you can't direct that. You can't tell a subject, look thoughtful, and get what Yoongi gives you naturally. It's either in someone's face or it isn't, and it's in his face at all times. Now let's talk about his facial structure, because this is where the technical photography analysis gets really compelling. Yoongi has what the community described as a compact, high-definition face. His face is physically small, which in Korean beauty standards is already considered highly desirable. But beyond aesthetics, a smaller face has genuine photographic advantages. In close-up portrait work, a more compact face means that all features are in tighter proximity to each other in the frame, which creates a more immediate visual impact. Think of it like the difference between a billboard and a spotlight. Both are effective, but the spotlight hits harder because the energy is concentrated. Yoongi's compact facial structure means that even in a tightly cropped headshot, every feature, his eyes, his nose, his lips, his jawline, is working together in a small, powerful area of the frame, creating an image that feels dense with visual information. His jawline is another point that photographers specifically highlighted. Yoongi has a sharp, angular jawline with a slightly narrower chin that creates a V-line face shape. And in Korean photographic circles, this jaw type is considered exceptionally photogenic because it creates clean, definitive lines in both frontal and profile compositions. Unlike a rounder jawline that transitions softly into the neck, Yoongi's jawline creates a clear boundary that photographs as a distinct shape, giving his face an almost graphic quality. In black and white photography especially, that jawline becomes a striking compositional element. Several photographers shared conversions of Yoongi's photos to black and white to demonstrate how his facial contours alone, without color, without context, created visually arresting images. The bone structure does the heavy lifting. Now, here's something that genuinely surprised the broader community and became one of the most discussed points: Yoongi's skin in photographs. Like Jin, Yoongi has very fair skin, but photographers pointed out a crucial difference in how their skin reads on camera. Yoongi's skin has a slightly more translucent quality, what photographers call porcelain luminosity, where the skin appears to have subtle depth rather than surface-level smoothness. In practical terms, this means that when light hits Yoongi's skin, you can see very faint, very subtle tonal variations, tiny hints of warmth around the cheeks, cooler tones along the jaw, the slightest suggestion of blue undertones near the temples that give Yoongi's skin a living, three-dimensional quality in photographs. This translucency, combined with his dark hair and dark eyes, creates a natural high-contrast palette that photographers described as ready-made editorial. You don't need to adjust white balance, you don't need to push contrast in post-processing. Yoongi's face already has built-in contrast between his pale skin, dark features, and the shadows his bone structure creates. One photographer compared it to shooting someone who's already been color-graded by nature. And then there's the august D factor. When discussions about Yoongi's photogenic evolution came up, the photography community consistently pointed to his solo work, particularly the D2 and D-Day eras, as the moment when his visual potential went from underappreciated to undeniable. The concept photos for those projects placed Yoongi in dramatic, high-contrast, editorial-style settings that perfectly showcased every photographic advantage his face possesses. Dark backgrounds, single hard light sources, minimal styling, conditions that expose every flaw and every strength without mercy. And under those conditions, Yoongi didn't just survive, he thrived. Those photos circulated in photography communities not as celebrity content, but as examples of excellent portrait subjects. Photographers were using his images in discussions about lighting technique, about how bone structure interacts with shadow, about how eye shape affects emotional communication in still images. Min Yoongi became, in certain Korean photography circles, something close to a case study in photogenic potential being hidden in plain sight. The community's consensus was striking. Yoongi possesses a type of photogenic quality that's rare, almost artistic in nature. His face doesn't scream for attention in a crowded photo, it whispers. And that whisper is so compelling that you can't look away. He's not the member who dazzles you on first glance. He's the member whose photo you keep coming back to, keep staring at, keep finding new details in. And in the world of portrait photography, that kind of sustained visual magnetism is worth its weight in gold. Why not higher than number 4? The photographers acknowledged that while Yoongi's editorial and artistic photogenic qualities are top tier, in brighter, more commercial-style photography, think outdoor group shots, variety show screenshots, casual candid settings, his more subtle visual strengths don't always dominate the frame the way the top 3 members do. His photogenic power is strongest in controlled, intentional photographic contexts. But make no mistake, Min Yoongi at number 4, above the official visual of his own group, is the kind of result that makes you realize photographers see the world completely differently from the rest of us, and they're not wrong. That's your number 4.
Number 3, Jungkook. Number 3. And right now, millions of people would be absolutely losing their minds because we're talking about Jungkook, the Jungkook, the Golden Maknae, the man who has been voted most handsome face in global polls more times than most of us can count. The man whose fan camps casually break records with hundreds of millions of views. The guy who literally went viral for his passport photo, because even under the worst possible photographic conditions known to humanity, flat fluorescent lighting, white background, no expression allowed, he still looked like a movie star. That Jungkook is sitting at number 3, not number 1. And if you're feeling confused, shocked, or slightly betrayed by reality right now, trust me, the Korean photography community went through those exact same emotions before arriving at this ranking. Because placing Jungkook at anything other than the top spot feels almost illegal. But once you hear the photographer's reasoning, once you understand what separated him from the two members above him, it starts to make a kind of sense that's almost frustrating in how logical it is. So let's break this man's face down the way the professionals did, because even at number 3, Jungkook's photogenic analysis reads like a love letter from the camera itself. Let's start with the obvious. His eyes. Jungkook has what the Korean photography community unanimously described as the most optically magnetic eyes in BTS, and possibly in the entire current generation of K-pop. His eyes are large, round, and doe-like, with a prominent double eyelid fold that creates a wide, open eye shape. In photography, eye size relative to the rest of the face is a critical factor in what makes a subject feel approachable, youthful, and emotionally engaging. Jungkook's eyes are proportionately large for his face, which means they dominate the frame in close-up portrait work. When you look at a headshot of Jungkook, your gaze goes immediately and irresistibly to his eyes. They function as gravitational centers in every image. And the depth of his iris, this is something photographers specifically noted. His irises have a rich, dark warmth that absorbs light beautifully. Catch lights in his eyes don't just sit on the surface, they appear to float within the depth of the iris, creating an almost three-dimensional sparkle effect that makes his eyes look alive in a way that's difficult to replicate with any other subject. Multiple photographers noted that Jungkook's eyes alone would be enough to make him a top-tier photographic subject, if nothing else about his face was remarkable, which obviously is far from the case. His facial proportions are textbook photogenic. The ratio of his forehead to his mid-face to his lower face falls almost perfectly into the classic thirds division that photographers and artists have used for centuries as the gold standard for facial balance. His nose is straight, well-proportioned, and sits centrally in a way that anchors his other features without drawing excessive attention to itself. Photographers call this a supporting feature because it quietly holds the composition together without competing with the eyes or mouth. His lips are full and well-defined with a natural color that photographs as warm and healthy across various lighting temperatures. And his jawline, which has become significantly more defined as he's matured from a teenager into an adult, creates a strong masculine frame for his otherwise soft, youthful features. This combination, soft eyes and mouth with structured jawline, is what photographers call duality architecture, and it's one of the reasons Jungkook photographs so incredibly well across a wide range of concepts and moods. But here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. The Korean photography community identified something about Jungkook that they spent more time discussing than almost any other single topic in these threads: his unprecedented photogenic consistency. See, most people, even very attractive people, even models, even other BTS members, have angles, lighting conditions, or candid moments where they look noticeably less photogenic than their best shots. Everyone has a bad side or a lighting setup that doesn't flatter them. Jungkook, according to these photographers, essentially doesn't. Or if he does, no one has found it yet. They coined a term for this phenomenon that became something of a meme in these photography communities: zero-angle weakness. Fan-taken photos from below at concerts, an angle that is famously unflattering for almost every human being on the planet because it emphasizes the underside of the chin and nostrils. Jungkook looks fantastic. Paparazzi shots from across the street with a telephoto lens, no controlled lighting, random background, caught mid-step. Jungkook looks like he's shooting a campaign. Screenshots from low-resolution live broadcast footage with terrible compression and flat lighting, still photogenic. Selfies taken on a phone at arm's length with no filter, magazine cover material. This consistency is not something that should be physically possible to the degree that Jungkook demonstrates it, and photographers were genuinely baffled by it. One photographer tried to rationalize it by analyzing his facial geometry and concluded that Jungkook's features are positioned in such a way that no single angle creates a disproportionate distortion. His nose doesn't appear dramatically different between frontal and profile. His eyes maintain their shape and impact from every angle. His jawline reads as strong whether photographed from slightly above, at eye level, or from below. This geometric resilience means the camera literally cannot find a bad angle because his face maintains its proportional harmony regardless of perspective. Several photographers compared it to a well-designed piece of industrial product, something engineered to look good from every viewing angle, except no one engineered Jungkook's face. That's just how it is. His body adds another massive dimension to his photogenic arsenal. Since around 2019-2020, Jungkook has maintained a noticeably muscular, well-defined physique that photographs with an almost sculptural quality. His shoulder-to-waist ratio is dramatic, broad, defined shoulders tapering to a narrow waist, creating a V-shaped silhouette that is one of the most universally flattering body shapes in photography. Photographers noted that in full body shots, Jungkook's physique creates natural lines and angles that add dynamic energy to the composition. He doesn't just stand in a frame, his body creates shapes within the frame that make the image more visually interesting. And his tattoo on his right arm, this came up a lot in discussions, actually serves as a photographic asset because it adds textural complexity and visual interest to images, breaking up large areas of skin that might otherwise read as flat. His skin itself is another major point. Jungkook has a warm, golden-toned complexion that photographers described as universally flattering under any white balance setting. Whether the lighting is warm tungsten, cool daylight, or neutral flash, his skin tone adapts and remains attractive with some constant degree. This is partly genetics and partly his skin's texture, which has a natural healthy sheen that catches and diffuses light in a way that creates a subtle glow effect without looking oily or overexposed. Photographers called his skin self-diffusing. It naturally softens light as it reflects, which means even harsh, direct lighting sources produce relatively gentle and flattering results on his face. So, with all of this, the magnetic eyes, the perfect proportions, the zero-angle weakness, the universally flattering skin, the dynamic physique, why in the world is Jungkook at number 3 and not number 1? And this is the part that made the photography community's discussion so incredibly nuanced and so fiercely debated. The primary reasoning came down to a concept that photographers called photogenic tension. While Jungkook's face is undeniably overwhelmingly photogenic in every measurable way, some photographers argued that his photogenic quality is of a universally appealing type, meaning his face is optimized to look good to everyone in any condition at all times. And while that sounds like it should be the ultimate compliment, and in many ways it is, there's a counter-argument in artistic photography circles that the most photogenic faces aren't just the ones that look universally good, but the ones that create a visual tension or an emotional provocation that makes the viewer feel something more complex than just, wow, he's attractive. Jungkook's face, in its perfection, sometimes reads as resolved. Every proportion is in its right place, every feature is balanced, and the overall effect is harmoniously beautiful. The two members above him, according to these photographers, possess faces that are equally beautiful with subtle visual tensions and unusual asymmetry and unusual feature ratio and expression quality that creates unresolved emotional depth that make their photographs not just beautiful to look at, but impossible to stop looking at. It's the difference between a face you admire and a face that haunts you. Jungkook's face earns universal admiration. The faces above him earn something photographers described as obsession. But let's be absolutely clear. Jungkook at number 3 is still a top 3 most photogenic member of BTS as judged by actual photographers. His zero-angle weakness alone puts him in a category that most professional models would envy. His face is a gift to every camera that has ever been pointed at it. That's your number 3.
Number 2. Jimin.
Okay, if the last placement caused an earthquake, this one caused a full-blown civil war among the photography community because placing Park Jimin at number 2 was a decision that kept forum moderators awake for days trying to manage the fierce, passionate debates erupting across the boards. When we talk about Jimin in front of a camera, we are no longer just talking about a Kpop idol taking pictures. We are talking about high art, about a living, breathing muse who fundamentally changes the atmosphere of a room the second a lens cap is removed. To understand why Jimin commands this staggering position, you have to understand a concept that editorial photographers are absolutely obsessed with: implied motion. Most subjects, even professional models, treat a photograph as a static medium. They freeze, they pose, they hold their breath, and they wait for the flash. Jimin does not freeze. Because of his extensive background in contemporary dance and ballet, Jimin approaches a camera not as a mirror to pose in front of, but as an audience to perform for, creating stills that vibrate with an insane amount of kinetic energy. Photographers noted that even when Jimin is sitting completely still in a chair, there is a visible magnetic tension in his body, the deliberate, graceful arch of his neck, the precise, almost agonizingly delicate placement of his fingertips, the engagement of his core that elongates his torso, which tricks the human eye into believing he is caught in the middle of a breathtaking sequence of movement. A prominent Korean fashion photographer wrote a massive essay on a Naver forum dissecting this exact phenomenon, stating, "Shooting Park Jimin is like trying to photograph smoke or water. He is so fluid, so deeply connected to his spatial awareness that he doesn't just fill the negative space in a frame, he completely manipulates it." But the body mechanics are only half the story, because then we have to talk about the absolute visual paradox that is his face. Jimin's facial structure is a walking contradiction, and cameras are famously addicted to contradictions. From the front, he possesses these incredibly soft, rounded, almost cherubic features, full, pillowy lips, soft cheeks, and gentle slope to his nose that gives him an aura of untouchable, ethereal innocence. But the moment, the literal microsecond he turns his head even a fraction of an inch to a 3/4 angle or a full profile, the camera is suddenly confronted with a razor-sharp L-shaped jawline that cuts like shattered glass and a striking, elegant neck dominated by a prominent sternocleidomastoid muscle that casts deep, dramatic shadows under studio lighting. This duality forces the camera to capture two completely different aesthetic profiles simultaneously, a mochi softness colliding violently with a blade-like sharpness, creating a visual tension that makes his portraits impossible to look away from. And then there are his eyes. Jimin's eyes are legendary within photography circles. They possess a subtle asymmetry and a classic monolid shape that allows him to control the weight of his gaze with terrifying precision. When he drops his chin and looks up through his lashes, a signature move that photographers lovingly refer to as his fatal angle, the shape of his eyes becomes incredibly feline and predatory, dripping with a dark, melancholic seduction that completely alters the narrative of the photograph. He doesn't just look at the camera, he stares through it, challenging the viewer, projecting raw, unfiltered emotion that ranges from heartbreaking vulnerability in concepts like Spring Day to dangerous, intoxicating arrogance in eras like Blood, Sweat, and Tears or his solo Face promotions. Photographers emphasize that Jimin is a master of micro-expressions. A shift of a millimeter in the corners of his mouth or a slight narrowing of his eyes can change the entire mood of a shoot, making him a dream for editorial directors who want to tell complex, cinematic stories without uttering a single word. Furthermore, the community highlighted how his skin and hair interact with light. Jimin often experiments with extreme hair colors and dramatic styling, yet his underlying bone structure and fair, smooth complexion serve as the perfect, flawless canvas that absorbs and reflects both harsh, avant-garde neon lighting and soft, romantic natural light with equal brilliance. In black and white photography, the contrast between the dark intensity of his pupils and the soft luminescence of his skin creates a chiaroscuro effect that looks like a Renaissance painting brought to life. He understands the geometry of light. He instinctively knows exactly how far to tilt his chin to catch a rim light on his jaw, or how to angle his face so a shadow falls perfectly across one eye to create mystery. It is a level of photographic intelligence that usually takes decades to cultivate, but for Jimin it is entirely innate, born from his deep connection to emotional expression. So, the agonizing question that tore the community apart, if he is this perfect, if he is the ultimate ethereal muse of motion and emotion, why is he number 2 and not number 1? The reasoning provided by the most senior photographers in the debate came down to the difference between a muse and an anomaly. Jimin is the ultimate muse. His photogenic power comes from his breathtaking ability to perform for the lens, utilizing his dance background, his emotional depth, and his physical tension to create masterpieces of implied motion. But the member who took the number 1 spot, he doesn't need to perform. He doesn't need tension or motion or even a specific mood. The number 1 spot belongs to a face that photographers described as a structural anomaly, a face that essentially breaks the rules of photography itself just by existing in the frame, commanding the lens with a terrifying, effortless absolute that defies logic. Jimin elevates photography into high art through his ethereal, fluid brilliance, making him an undisputed god of the camera, but the throne was claimed by someone whose bone structure alone caused the industry to collectively gasp. Number 1. BTS V. Here it is. The absolute zenith, the undisputed, unchallenged, and universally feared king of the camera. When the Korean photography community reached number 1, there was no debate, no hesitation, and no civil war. There was only a unanimous, almost terrifying consensus that Kim Taehyung, universally known as V, is not just the most photogenic member of BTS, but quite possibly one of the most photographically dominant faces of this entire generation. To understand the sheer magnitude of Taehyung's power in front of a lens, we have to throw away every conventional rule of portrait photography, because Taehyung's face actively defies them. Photographers don't capture V, V captures the camera. Let's start with the foundation that earned him the legendary nickname CGV, or Computer Graphic V, among Korean netizens and professionals alike. His facial architecture is what industry veterans call a structural anomaly, a face so hyper-defined and perfectly sculpted that it literally looks like it was rendered by a high-end CGI artist. The absolute core of this dominance lies in his T-zone, a term photographers use to describe the line running across the brow ridge and down the bridge of the nose. Taehyung's T-zone is historically profound. His brow bone is strong, prominent, and casts an imposing masculine shadow over his deep-set eyes, while his nose bridge is high, straight, and ends in a sharply defined tip that anchors the entire center of his face. This robust sculptural T-zone means that in any lighting condition, whether it's the harsh, unforgiving flash of a paparazzi camera, the moody, directional shadows of an editorial studio, or the flat, washed-out fluorescent lighting of a backstage hallway, his face never loses its three-dimensional depth. It is physically impossible for a camera to flatten Kim Taehyung. But what pushes him from simply being handsome to an absolute photographic phenomenon is the shocking duality of his facial asymmetry. Unlike Jin, whose power lies in perfect symmetry, Taehyung's power lies in a beautiful, calculated imbalance. He famously has one monolid and one double lid. To a casual observer, this might seem like a minor detail, but to a portrait photographer, it is the holy grail of visual storytelling. Depending on which side of his face is angled toward the lens, he projects two completely different cinematic universes. His left profile, dominated by the double lid, reads as softer, more boyish, incredibly vulnerable and melancholy, reminiscent of a tragic hero in a classic French film. His right profile, dominated by the sharp monolid and a more pronounced jaw angle, is pure, predatory, high-fashion arrogance. Photographers have gone on record stating that shooting Taehyung is like shooting two different supermodels in the same session. You simply ask him to turn his head an inch and the entire narrative of the photo shoot flips entirely. Then we must discuss his gaze, which is arguably the most lethal weapon in his visual arsenal. While Jimin uses implied motion and tension to create a story, Taehyung uses absolute chilling stillness. He possesses what fashion directors call the sanpaku eye, where the white of the eye is visible underneath the iris. In photography, this creates an aura of danger, mystery, and an almost hypnotic intensity. His eyelashes are unusually long and thick, so much so that under studio lights, they cast literal physical shadows across his cheekbones, adding a built-in layer of chiaroscuro that most photographers have to create artificially. When Taehyung stares directly down the barrel of a lens, he doesn't have to flex a single muscle in his face. His neutral, deadpan expression carries so much intrinsic emotional weight, so much heavy, unspoken narrative, that it completely consumes the frame. A veteran Korean fashion photographer who worked on his solo magazine covers confessed that looking at Taehyung through a viewfinder is genuinely intimidating. His gaze is so piercing, so unnervingly present, that it feels less like you were taking his picture and more like he's looking directly into your soul, daring you to press the shutter. We also have to talk about his mouth and the way he uses it as a photographic tool. While his boxy smile is iconic and beloved, his resting face, where his lips naturally part just slightly, adds a layer of androgynous sensuality that high-fashion editorials absolutely covet. He has an aristocratic, almost vampiric elegance that makes everything around him look exponentially more expensive. Furthermore, his ability to digest and elevate any aesthetic concept is unparalleled. unparalleled. Whether he's draped in romantic vintage pearls and ruffles, embodying a brooding cinematic rebel with a bloody lip, or stripped down to the barest, rawest, most minimalist styling, his face remains the undisputed focal point. He doesn't just wear the concept, he swallows it whole. His prominent, sharp cheekbones and the impossibly clean line of his jaw provide a canvas that luxury brands like Celine and Cartier fight over, because his facial structure inherently screams premium. He understands his own face on a molecular level. His spatial awareness extends to his hands, which he frequently uses as framing devices, long, elegant artist's hands that wrap around his neck, cover one eye, or pull at his lower lip, creating instantly iconic still frames without him ever needing a director to tell him what to do. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly why the experts bowed down. That is why the Korean photography community universally crowned him the ultimate, unrivaled visual masterpiece of BTS.
And there you have it. A mind-blowing, eye-opening journey through the lenses of professional Korean photographers who dissected the visual power of the biggest boy band in the world. From RM's commanding spatial presence to V's untouchable structural supremacy, it is spectacularly clear that being photogenic is a complex, fascinating art form that goes way beyond just having a pretty face. The camera sees things that we completely miss. It sees the poetry of shadows, the tension in a neck muscle, the architecture of a jawline, and the raw emotional gravity hiding inside a pupil. This list proves that every single member of BTS brings a completely unique, devastatingly powerful flavor to the frame, making them not just a musical phenomenon, but an absolute nightmare for any other celebrity trying to compete in a photo shoot. So, what do you think? Do you agree with the elite photography professionals, or do your bias goggles tell a completely different story? Did your favorite members' ranking genuinely shock you, or did you know all along that they possessed this kind of secret, unteachable photographic weapon? Keep snapping, keep analyzing those concert photos, and I promise you, you will never look at a BTS photo shoot the exact same way ever again. Thanks for tuning in to this deep dive edutainment countdown. Hit that replay button if your brain is still processing these visuals, and until next time, stay curious and stay picture perfect.